welcome everybody to this very first episode of the Blue Dragon podcast, a podcast dedicated for IT decision makers wanting to have more understanding and gain perspective of what's going on in cloud, AI, and security. And today I have the honor of introducing you to Jonah Anderson. Jonah is the author of this wonderful book, Learning Microsoft Azure, Cloud Computing and Development Fundamentals. So,
Great.
for those of you who don't know you yet, Jonah, can you take a minute and just describe your background and how you ended up teaching cloud computing and development fundamentals with Azure?
Yes, to those that are who are listening to us right now, I'm Jonah Anderson. I am based in Sweden. I was originally born in the Philippines, so I'm kind of like multicultural person. But I what I do is that I work as a senior Azure consultant at a consulting company called Solidify in Sweden. And part of my job as a senior Azure consultant is a mix of different things, from development to cloud architectures, focus on Azure, development with .NET, DevSecOps, and infrastructure management. So I'm pretty broad in my skills. And of course, I do love my job because it allows me to collaborate and learn from different perspective of my team and colleagues. And Jetro and I met as an MCT and through the MCT community, and that's because I'm also a Microsoft certified trainer and very active in the community as a Microsoft MVP, leading Azure User Group Sweden. I have an external podcast called Extend Women in Tech Podcast, and I also wrote my first book, Learning Microsoft Azure with O'Reilly, which Jetro also had the honor to read and review, of course.
Yes, I'm definitely going to talk about the book later
Yes.
on. When I look at your LinkedIn, it's impressive, Jonah. It is inspiring tech with a genuine heart, developer of the year 2023, MVP Microsoft on Azure, Cloud DevSecOps. You're a MCT as well, even regional lead in Sweden, you're
Yes, yes,
based,
that's
correct?
right.
International speaker, author of the book, and on LinkedIn, a top cloud computing voice and almost 13,000 followers.
Yes,
That's
yes.
real
I
nice.
also got that. If you hover the top cloud computing voice, I actually have top software engineering practices voice as well. I got two, but they don't show it. But thank you. Yes, yes. So
Wow.
it looks like I'm a woman with lots of titles. But if you notice my subtitle on LinkedIn, what I really want to highlight is I'm a person, a simple person who wants to inspire tech. And that's the drive and the passion that lead me to have those titles. Like I could toggle in all of those titles or things that I do. And it's because the passion that I have to inspire others through tech and what I do is what fills my cup, if you know what I mean, like giving me
Hmm.
energy to do that. It inspires me to inspire.
It's nice because when I did a bachelor in information technology, it was 2003, 2006. Like women in tech, that was like 10%. Uh, so it's I don't know if is it normal or the same in Sweden? Like it's a minority, while in Eastern Europe it's like 50%. I learned. So why do you think that that difference is there, and why does it resonate so much with you to help this community?
Yes, that's a great question. I think there's still, I mean, in Sweden, as far as and I watched the statistic on the gender gap, like statistic every year. I believe Sweden is on the top 10 countries around the globe that are really working on diversity, like having this gender balance in terms of tech or in general. But I still do see that the gap in a way that there's not so many developers or DevSecOps engineers like me working with cloud or what I do, and there's still a gap. That's why I do get on stages, even though I used to be shy. And what really motivated me to inspire tech and not being mistaken to be the feminist, because I believe that everyone, men, women with diverse background, has the right to build something and create something with technology. And that's what I want to advocate. And what really inspired me to be a role model, that's why I won awards in that side of Developer of the Year community. When I was teaching programming to kids on the side, I did see the gap there already in schools. And me working as a junior developer years ago, I was the only female developer. And I thought to myself, what I do is fun, and why are we missing some of this, like opportunities for women as well, or everyone? So yeah, that's why I still continue to do what I can. I cannot solve the general problem of that, but
Hmm.
we try. You inviting me and highlighting what I do, it's one great help already in making a difference in my perspective.
Nice, wonderful, great to hear that. Yeah, I think 2 years ago I stepped into a conference in Brussels. It was a Tech EU conference. I walked into the room and half of the audience were women.
Oh,
It was for entire European Union, and I was like, "Am I in the right?" Because it was a tech thing. Am I in the right conference? This is just perhaps sales or marketing. And I started talking to people, and most of them, of the women, came out of Eastern Europe. And I asked, "Is it normal to have this kind of ratio in there?" They said, "Yeah,
okay,
it's actually more balanced, or like 40-60,
okay.
because it's IT is a job that you can combine easily or more, better with a family because it's remote, or you can have different schedules
Mhm.
there. And apparently there's a system to promote it amongst the women. So it was really inspiring to see
Yes,
that.
yes, yeah. I do see that as well in Sweden, but I still see the gap in terms of like tech conferences, teams. You see, at least the ratio is not really equal, but I do see that it's getting better, not getting worse like the good old days, but it's getting there as long as like you just like speak up and share what you can regardless of your gender, respect everybody. I think that's a key feature in having this inclusive tech. Yes.
Nice. So let's pivot towards cloud and cloud
Mhm.
technology. So you're from Sweden, you've been working there for a number of years. I'm from Belgium. How do you see the attitude of organizations towards public cloud? Is cloud computing trending, or are we past the hype?
I think it's still trending. I mean, it's trending, but I do see, I mean, at least in what I know, because I only can share what I know, right? In my area, in the mid north Sweden, we do have some organizations or government companies that still are trying to adjust with the cloud adoption. So, for example, in my area where I live, Sundsvall, uh, Azure is not really so popular yet in a way. I mean, there are companies I know that are working with that, but there are major companies, organization in my area, in the city where I live, are still on-prem because they are government controlled systems. And, when it comes to GDPR compliance, they need to be strategic if they're gonna do fully cloud or they're gonna just like stay on prem. So I think cloud education and learning about the benefits of cloud, including the possibilities of hybrid solutions like Azure Arc for Azure, is a good way to share it to those kinds of organizations that are still having challenges in terms of that.
And let's say a regular organization, so not government and not really regulated like a healthcare or a finances, a regular business in Sweden. How are they looking towards public cloud?
I believe, in my perspective, and based on what I see, especially in bigger cities like Stockholm, I believe they are adapting cloud, for example. So in my company, Solidify, we speak a lot about DevSecOps, both in Azure DevOps and a GitHub perspective. And most of our clients speak a lot about this developer productivity in cloud and everything. So I think we are getting there. We just need more advocates, cloud advocates like us, to spread the knowledge about its good things.
Exactly, exactly. So when I started in 2006 in the workforce in IT, I started as a software developer. I did C#.net and SQL Server and all of that. Um, I've seen the rise of cloud computing in
Mhm.
Belgium, And for me, the tipping point was like 2016. Then public cloud really started to be adopted by organizations, with Azure mainly in Belgium. Um, and you can see it's picking up and it's going faster and
Mm.
faster. But from your perspective in Sweden, like when did it take off, this public cloud adoption, and what were the main drivers?
That's a great question, because it's also a challenging one because I don't know all of the companies, but I believe it started like the companies thinking about cloud migration started, I believe, like 6 8 years ago when Azure was exposed more in Sweden, in Europe, and I think of all cloud computing providers, correct me if I'm wrong, I think Azure is still pretty big in Europe. I mean, is that the same in Belgium for
Yeah.
you?
Yeah, it's number one
Yes.
in Belgium, the Netherlands, and Luxembourg, followed by
Yes,
AWS.
yes. So even though multi-cloud and learning the other cloud platforms is very important also for us developers, but the adoption of cloud started about like more than 5 years ago here in Sweden, especially in my project, because I think you read also in my book the reason why I was really motivated to write my book, Learning Microsoft Azure, was because of my own cloud migration journey, where I help a company, an organization, a private one, lift their on prem legacy .NET application to the cloud. And you've probably, if you read the book, there I had went through a lot of learnings and tried everything. And security was one of the reasons, and compliance were one of the reasons, and miss not knowing so much about the cloud was the reason why it didn't really make it to production, even though we had a working application then. Yes.
Nice. Because what I see in Belgium, in my
Hmm.
experience, was in 2016, you could really see it taking off. But before that, to be honest, in the media sector, um, AWS has a strong foothold because in about 2006, 2010, they were digitizing their video materials,
Okay.
typical for media
Yes.
companies. And they were like, where do we store all this video footage on high definition? And then they went to Amazon for like a few cents per gigabytes per month, and that's how it got started. So the business driver there was storage,
Okay.
cheap and safe
Hmm.
storage. But then as we move towards 2016, we see Azure, getting more mature. And then, at least from my perspective in Belgium, companies were thinking, I have a server room. Every 4 years, I need to renew the hardware. What if I can decommission a few servers and move
Hmm.
towards cloud for better and faster development? So that was the main driver there. Um, so a faster go-to market.
Yes.
Is that something that
Yeah.
resonates with you in your
Yes, yes. In
experience?
addition to the cloud migration that I mentioned, one of the drivers that we had in that project for this organization was also moving away from on-prem, and also the advantage of being competitive in the market and applying these new technologies. Because in my perspective, if you have this legacy code, legacy application, and you're still on prem, you're actually really behind. With consideration of what we see today for the past years, how cloud computing, cloud providers really accelerate features that they provide for their customers. Like what you see today, this year, is like the Copilot and ChatGPT AI that you can implement in your applications to make them smarter. So if you're still on prem, that would be very hard to do. And the advantage, the driver, I think that's why many people are considering cloud, is the ability to auto scale based on conditions, which is very useful in terms of business use case scenarios and being reliable out there in production.
Yeah, the auto
Yes,
scale
yes.
feature indeed. Very nice. Have you ever seen it working, let's say like working, there was a burst or a high peak demand and then it scaled out from on-prem towards Azure and then it worked fine and then it scaled down again. Have you ever seen that working and done such a project?
Not in my cloud migration project, but I did help configure some kind of like a monitoring, like in Azure you can actually scale up and down specific services depending on demands and conditions. So that I have been involved with, and I know that many organizations are truly adapting that scaling feature, especially for, serverless, event-driven type scenarios, microservices, and I believe container as well with AKS on Azure. So Manny wants to do
Yeah,
that,
exactly.
but I haven't seen it in action since I'm working focused on a different part of my project. But it is useful and possible, of course, for Manny.
Yeah. And for those who are listening and want more information, in the book you have a section on that, on the
Yes,
scaling, and also with the Azure Traffic Manager and burst to other regions. So it's really nice
yes,
documented there.
yes,
So talking about the cloud adoption, still about companies moving towards public cloud. You say it's still trending, and we see more organizations. Okay, there are some sectors like government who are a little bit hesitant, but from private organizations, you see a good adoption. Same here in
hmm,
Belgium. But then what I see here in Belgium is they kind of stick with infrastructure as a service. So the virtual machines and the
yeah.
databases and all of that. How do you see it, the ratio versus IaaS versus platform as a service?
Okay, that's interesting because based on the project I've been involved with, there are still some projects, a part of that project or applications that are still in VMs and on-prem. But I think there's more projects here in Sweden leading to platform as a service because we know, right? Regardless of the cloud provider, the benefits of platform as a service as a model is that the the benefit of not worrying about maintaining the infrastructures behind, and then the developers and the team can just like focus on the development, which speed ups the delivery to production. But I think it's 50-50 in my perspective. Maybe I don't see everything, but I think it's
Sure.
50 there, 50% moving to platform as a service. And it, for me, in my perspective, it depends on the maturity of the company, how adapted they are in terms of like which model suits best for their use case. And I assume those that are still staying on prem and partly on VM, they prefer to have more control on infrastructure, because of many reasons maybe. But those that are adopting platform as a service, like serverless, containers, scaling, and having their applications robust and allowing their developers to learn new things on new technologies, they're more, I think, leading towards like innovation and modernization, kind of bravery in my perspective. Yes.
Exactly. I fully agree there. It's just that in practice, when I look at organizations, they're lifting and shifting from on-prem to cloud, so it's all IaaS based. And then if they go to a platform, PaaS services, it's usually a greenfield project, a new cloud native app, and then they're using
Yes.
PaaS. But the IaaS thing usually stays there. It's not like they're re-architecting it towards PaaS. I don't see that happen
Yes,
often.
yes. In my project right now, I we do combine. I mean, we have different services. We have microservices. So our applications, we implement PaaS, platform as a service, like app services and API management and stuff like that. But we do use infrastructure as a service model, like VMs, for our agent pools. In that way, that's also a good way to utilize infrastructure type of models. But I think we're combining it in a good way, because we want to have control of our agent pools in Azure DevOps. So we want to have our own VMs and not have them on prem when we don't see what's going on. So a combination, and depending on the use case, and how a specific model suits, I think
Mhm.
it's a good thing, and
Mhm.
every project is unique.
So when you talk about Azure, you've been working for quite some years with
Hmm.
Azure. I would say that the Azure today is not the Azure of 5 years ago. So how do you see, or how did you see Azure evolve in the last 5 years, and what were the most significant things that you've observed?
Yes, that's a great question. A lot of things aside from name changes, maybe. I think there's a lot of things that happened for the past 5 years. Like one example is like when I did my cloud migration journey myself. I was the only one that was like could do Azure, and I have to help educate my colleagues or my team. At that time, the cloud adoption framework and well architected framework and the options for Azure Arc and Azure Migrate from on prem servers to cloud were not available then. So that's a big change. The multi cloud and hybrid solutions that came up today, and also the CLIs that's available in Cloud Shells. Like developers couldn't like take control of that through those tools, but now you can do like you can control and manage Azure resources through your web browser or any CLI tools. And also today, the AI capabilities that Azure has built in. So recently, I got access to Azure Copilot that I'm trying to test, and how AI can help me with my Azure resources within Azure Portal. So a lot of things. There are
Indeed,
just a few.
indeed. When I give trainings, the Azure fundamentals and the security fundamentals, recently I heard somebody say, I did the Azure fundamentals 3, 4, 5 years ago. I said, yeah, but AZ900 of that time is no longer the same as today.
Yes.
A lot gets
Mm-hmm.
added. And what I'm seeing with all these certifications is like the 3-star one, they slice out a part and then move it towards the
Yes.
2-star. And then the 2-star slice, and it goes to the 1-star, the fundamentals. So the fundamentals only get bigger
Yeah,
every
yes,
year.
yes. And I think fundamentals is very important as well, especially if you're someone that's new to the cloud, but you want to uh, adopt multi-cloud in the future. So if you're a new cloud engineer or developer, of course you want to focus in one cloud provider, one programming language, but having this basics or fundamentals is truly vital because, like for example, the different cloud deployment models is common to all cloud public clouds that we have today. So Azure fundamentals, I'm guessing, the basics that we know before is like infrastructure as a service, PaaS, SaaS. Now there's like X as a service, database as a
Exactly.
service, containers as a service, functions as a service. I think you can build service out of of a solution. So it's interesting. So it will change. I think that course AZ900.
Yeah, and I gotta be honest. Last year, I was at my client at Proximus, and I was giving a short speech, and I said to the audience, like 300 people, all technical and also commercial, and I said, every one of you needs to take the AZ900, whether you're going to work with Azure hands-on or not. You should uh, pass the exam because 80% is vendor
Hmm.
agnostic. It's the same concepts for the
Yes.
others. And it stretches your mind to understand really what cloud is all about.
Yes.
You'll be a better business developer. You'll be a better developer. You'll be a better a service engineer or customer success manager if you understand what cloud is all
Yes.
about. So I'm a very good advocate of the fundamentals of
Yes.
the
Yeah.
Microsoft
Me too.
platform.
That's why I wrote my book with the word fundamentals because, first of all, I do believe that fundamentals is important in everything and getting started with everything and even getting better. And also, I wanted to speak, teach, and write something about Microsoft technologies in a way that I'm inclusive to everybody, and that includes beginners. So that's my goal. I have that in my mindset to every time I create something. I don't wanna exclude the beginners because that's how we motivate like juniors to be like us, to be delegates as well of the technology by including them. That and in order to include them, they need to know the basics like we used to when we were
True.
juniors as well. Yes.
True, true. And a few weeks ago, I was teaching also the first time for me the AI 900. So
Yeah. Yes.
the AI fundamentals. And to be honest, when I was preparing that, that was a tough a tough nut to crack, because they're talking about regression and all of the algorithms and the principles behind
Yes.
it, and also OpenAI. But I was thinking, if this is just the fundamentals, imagine if you don't understand this. How will you in a few years even be able to talk to a customer
Yes.
on this
Yeah.
topic?
Yes.
So I really love the Microsoft Azure, the fundamentals track. It's really
Yes,
nice
yeah.
done. So
I'm
I
working on learning the AI fundamentals as well. So I'm taking one of the Microsoft Learn Challenge for AI. And then I hope to take the AI fundamentals as well so I can teach it, because I agree with you that it's just fundamentals, but there are like things that we can learn that we don't really know, because we're used to developing, working with cloud and DevSecOps, but the AI is a different perspective. And if you have the fundamentals knowledge of it, it would be easier, as you said, to implement it in what you do, and also explain it to others who are also new into these technologies that are really relevant in terms of the best way and responsible way of using AI.
exactly. Before diving into the book, I got a question that's kind of tricky, that's kind of hot right
Hmm.
now, which is the concept of cloud repatriation. So people, organizations moving their workloads back from public cloud towards on-premise,
Yes.
mainly because their driver is cost. They say, "Oh, we're going towards cloud, and then it costs us so much, and then going back." How do you see that trend in Sweden, and what are your thoughts about it?
Okay, that's a good question, because I think last last few events I did virtually, I got the question, what's your perspective about organizations moving away from the cloud? And I was like surprised to get a question, because I always speak about like migrating to to cloud. But in my to answer the question, I don't know any specific project in my perspective that are moving away from the cloud, because as far as I know, people needs help in migrating and need advice. But my input and perspective in terms of that is that I believe that one of the motivations or reasons why they want to move away is first probably the cost. It's too expensive for them. And I think the cost problem is pretty broad, because if you're someone building an architecture for cloud that's not well designed with the mindset of thinking about cost optimization, then it can be very expensive. And developers and those everyone in the team needs to think about cost perspective also, because for example, you're a developer, you're building serverless with Azure Functions. If you're a developer who don't care about writing your code very well, and you have this forever loop running on serverless, and the instance in Azure Function app is like serverless, which runs every time we run, behind the scenes, maybe the infra or platform engineers doesn't know what's going on. What's the problem? Why we're getting these high bills on Azure Functions, for example? And it's actually the root cause was the code. So I think all layers, um, having the good architecture, everyone and the team on board, can make a difference in terms of cost. And maybe that's why people are having challenges with that and they're moving away and going back to on-prem, back to scratch. And I think also miseducation or not knowing what are the great benefits there is available on cloud. And it's just because maybe it doesn't work when they first tried. So that's just my perspective, but it's different use case to use case, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, I think the main argument for them moving workloads back to on-premise is
Mm,
cost, and sometimes it's better to buy the music than to rent it.
mm,
Right? If you're always listening to the same album, it's better to buy the album and then pay your 10 euros a month on Spotify and just having that
yeah.
album. So sometimes buy versus rent, that decision. I think the major case that kind of triggered this was I forgot his name, but from a 39 or 37 signals.com. He's a very well influential
Mm,
person. He's a CTO of this company, a SaaS company, and he said like 2 years ago, I'm moving back on premise because it saves me a lot of
okay.
cost. But the reasoning behind it is he knows exactly what he
Hmm.
needs. He has a couple of data centers he
Okay.
leases, and that's all he needs. He doesn't need the latest things. So in his case,
Yes.
it's a lot better to move back on prem, and he has the staff, to manage it
Yes.
and train it.
Okay. Agree.
So in that sense, yes. But the other thing in Belgium that I see is a lot of companies are saying the bill shock hurts, the first time you get the bill or the invoice.
Yes.
But that's because they got stuck on yes. They did a lift and shift and then left it
Yeah,
there.
yeah.
They never optimized.
Yes, I know how it feels to get a shock bill. When I was learning Azure, I mean, even before I became a trainer and got certified myself, when I was super beginner in Azure, the first thing that I made a mistake in terms of using cloud was I was doing a lab, like testing out Azure VM, and then I forgot to turn it off, and then I was using my personal card, Imagine it like running in a month, then I had to pay for it. So it's like the same also. I mean, regardless if you're a junior or matured already in your journey, if you are not strategic about the type of services that you use for the cloud, I think the cost can be a factor as well in terms of that. But that's good, really good scenario you mentioned about your contact or the one that moving back on prem was the best option for him because he has data centers and he know exactly what he needs. Others don't have that capability maybe yet to identify what they really need on prem or on cloud.
Yeah. So I've become more
Mm-hmm.
nuanced. So when I also talk to clients, I say, look, I'm pro
Mm-hmm.
cloud, but I'm not cloud only.
Yes,
There's a hybrid world.
agree.
There are reasons to stay on premise, and if you give that nuance to organizations, they feel okay. You're not the cloud only
Mm-hmm.
evangelist. But I always emphasize the big innovation and the drivers
Yes,
behind it, like the AI and all of
same
that.
here.
So, with that said, let's dive into your book,
Yes,
the Learning Microsoft Azure. I got a nice copy from you, even signed. I'm really happy
yes.
with it. I read it in I think a week or a week and a
Yeah.
half. Um, and I even learned a lot of new
Oh, that's
things.
good to know. Your
But
daughter
before,
also read
yeah,
it, right?
yeah, true, true, true. She put
A
a,
mark.
sticky note with the heart. Yeah, that was nice. That was
Yes.
nice. I said one day you're going to read this
Yeah,
as
that's
well,
great.
but she's only six,
Yes.
so it's going to take some time. But can you share about the images because the technical drawings are
Mm.
beautiful. I've read many books. These are really beautiful drawings, and there's a story behind it that you right. So share
Yeah,
about that story.
so when you write a book, I mean, it's generally to the audience listening to us that the book is my first book. I'd never written a technical book before, so the entire process of the book writing for the past almost 2 years, it's a lot of research, learning, and of course, making the illustrations and diagrams. And when I was in the process of writing the book, aside from the words itself, I also had to do hand sketch my illustration because if you write a book, you cannot copy other images, right? It's copyright. So I learned how to sketch my own diagrams, and then I asked Riley, their designers, to make it look more professional. So the diagrams you see, they're hand drawn by me, but more like converted into more digital format. So that's mine. I still have a collection of hand drawings that I can share to others if they needed to see. But they are illustrations of personal touch plus tech knowledge in behind it. Yes.
Nice. I've seen a lot of LinkedIn posts by you where you have a stack of books and you're signing them
Yes, yes,
or
yes.
shipping them. How is it going? How is the sale going of the book?
I think it's doing well. I mean, I myself is very active and sharing. Not, of course, maybe I want to share to the world I wrote a book, but it's not really about the numbers of marketing. It's just like it spreads out in a way that, like, let's just say my company Solidify bought 15, 20 copies to give away during our GitHub Advanced Security event at Microsoft Sweden. So I posted about it, and another company or conference was curious about, oh, Jonah is also selling signed copies of her book, and she heard about it. So they reached out to me. So I didn't have to do so much effort except to speak about what I'm passionate about the technology, and share a bit about my book. But it's doing well as far as I could see the statistics, both the physical paperback and the online, which is on O'Reilly's platform. So I have, I think, 5,000 active readers on the online platform, and it doesn't earn me a lot of money, but it's still something, considering that I spent 300 plus hours for the book project. So not bad. And for me,
Nice.
it's not about
Congratulations.
money. It's more about how it helps those that really need the content, especially the basics of cloud and Azure.
Exactly.
So
Exactly. I thought you were going to say I wrote a book to compensate the first bill shock I had with Azure.
that was like a long time ago, even before I wrote the book. So yeah, so we will see. And just a heads up, it's not public yet, but it's okay if others know. The book is in the process of being translated to Chinese language.
Oh, wow.
So one
Congratulations.
thing that
Nice.
I've been trying to discuss with O'Reilly, my publisher, how do I verify? It's just like at the back of my mind. How do I verify if the translator translate what I wrote about Azure technically in a
Hmm.
good way? Since I don't write, read, and speak Chinese. So somehow I have to trust the translator that he or she knows that that translation is how it should be. So it'll be interesting.
Yeah, that's an interesting question, actually. Yeah, because it's your name on the
Yes.
book and everybody assumes it's your words. But if some nuance
Mhm.
changes, yeah,
Language
interesting.
can be tricky
Interesting.
sometimes.
Yeah. The two things I that stick in my mind that I learned about reading your book was the Azure IoT plug and play
Mm,
app.
yes, yes, yes.
But like, does it
It
exist? Yeah,
does.
and you explained it in your book. So that was new
Oh,
for me. And then Azure Chaos
yes,
Studio.
yes, yes, yes. So I tried to cover as much as I could on that book, but I now after months, I think there are more things that I could have added. Maybe there will be a second edition, but the plug and play is something I learned myself. I tried it myself, and when I spoke a few times about IoT, the dev kit as well, and I thought it's worth sharing in the book, especially those that are interested into IoT related type of development.
Yeah,
Yeah,
was like, oh,
great.
nice. And then you see Azure is changing and all the time, and new things appear. So really
Yes.
nice. Let's dive into the last topic about cloud
Mm-hmm.
security. So here's what I see. Architects usually focus on getting the application to work in the
Mm-hmm.
cloud. So, and then they focus on typical non-functional requirements like performance and resilience. And are they paying enough attention to cloud security, in your opinion?
The architects today, yes. Interesting. Architects is a very broad. From when I was like a junior one, I thought architect is just like one kind of role. But when you move to the modern IT development today, there can be a cloud solution architect, system architect. But in my perspective, interesting. Because I play a role of architect also in my consulting job, and I'm biased because I want to implement DevSecOps and security in mind when I build something. But I think based on what I know, some of the IT architects that I have in touch with, they're more focused on those things that you parameters that you mentioned, and not really adopting security, injecting security into it. And I think that should change because it's very important. They also need security awareness. You don't know you're being attacked, and you have security risk until you start preventing it. Just like having an insurance, you don't know when you need it until it happens. So I think
Exactly.
it is important, but I think security is being advocated mainly by security uh, experts like you or us, when we speak about cloud, we try to put it into DevSecOps and everything we do.
Yeah, yeah. Because when I look at it
Mm-hmm.
traditionally, I've worked for 15 years in software companies, and you always see there is the
Mm-hmm.
architect, and then there are the engineers, and the architect architects the application, the
Yes.
solution. And then when he moves to cloud, he just, okay, I need this type of web server, these load balancers, I need this type of, yeah, and he sets that up. But the whole security aspect is still usually unknown or less known to him because he's focusing on the solution
Yes, that's
architecture.
right. Mm-hmm.
And so, but if you translate that to a cloud environment, I always I shock people when I say, if configured well, cloud is more secure than on
Mm-hmm.
premise. But if misconfigured, your data is on the
Yes,
streets.
that's right. Yeah. One example of that is like when I help build, migrate our SQL MI to Azure SQL servers. And that includes setting up the infrastructure, the servers, the database inside it, and securing the networking part, that the database server is not exposed to the public. It's only open in our own VNet. And there's if you're new and you don't know how to configure it right with perspective of security, there's a box in Azure SQL Server that you can just check, and that it opens to the public and other resources outside Azure. So networking security on servers is really important in terms of infrastructure. But of course, code wise, there's also things to think about in terms of security, like making sure that the developers are not committing connection strings that are sensitive into the config file, but rather used Azure Key Vault or through the pipelines instead of exposing it. Yeah.
Exactly. And looking forward now, do you think that the cloud solution architect role is focused on, the setting up the Azure, and then there's going to be a cloud security architect role focused really on all levels of security? Do you see that kind of specialization, or do you think no, it has to be, more, it's going to be more the
I
same?
think it should be merged. There should be a synergy between this competence of IT architecture in terms of system solution perspective, but I think the ability to have this like security DevSecOps into IT architecture, there it should be combined. So if you are a person that have those skills, I think that's a very good architect, because you really have the skills behind IT architecture, security, thinking about security from dev to operations up to production. You're building something, architecting something that is robust and reliable, regardless if it's on cloud or on prem or hybrid. So I think we're getting to that, and that's my goal as well. So I'm trying to be one.
Nice, nice. I got to be honest. The thing is that I did the
Mhm.
cybersecurity
Yes,
architect
I'm working
track.
on that
It was
too.
really
Yes.
but what I noticed is, it's for me it's almost impossible to be good at both. So both the solution architect and the cybersecurity architect, because it's such a vast
Hmm.
domain on both sides. The cybersecurity architect, you're talking about Defender for Cloud, you're talking about Sentinel, you're talking about identity and access management, you're talking about the VNets and all of that. If you have to keep up to date with all of that and do that
Hmm.
well, and at the same time build a solution with the latest PaaS services, I find it tough to
Yeah.
combine. So actually, my opinion is that moving forward, the solution architects still need a good
Hmm.
security
Yes. Yes.
mindset, of course, in the DevSecOps, but there's going to be more and more need for specialized
Yes.
profiles for the entire cloud
Yeah.
security because it's just too big to
Yeah, I
handle.
agree. Yes. I think combining those two is very huge. In my like project, for example, we have a dedicated team for security, but I work with them because currently I am implementing or improving our DevSecOps through our pipelines, DevOps pipelines. So uh, I'm the one that like manages the infrastructure and DevOps, but I'm collaborating with our security team. So we work together and how we can make it work in our projects. So I think collaboration is also a key. If an organization has this different mini teams that has different specific roles, because it is how it is in some companies, then I think merging the knowledge sharing, exchanging back and forth, and collaborating are key factors in making it a success, in my perspective.
Yeah, I agree. And actually, looking forward to the future, here's what I
Hmm.
think is going to happen. If you see a pyramid, the bottom foundation is information security.
Yes.
So even like the ISO 27001, and it's like the
Hmm.
entire system. Then on top, you got cloud
Yes.
security, like making sure everything, all the controls are in place. But now what you're seeing is a third level, which is going to be AI
Yes.
security.
Yes. Yes.
I'm the technical reviewer for an
Hmm.
upcoming book, the Azure Open AI
Oh,
Cookbook,
great.
and I'm verifying all the recipes, deploying Azure Open AI, and it's just another workload in a
Hmm.
resource group, and it needs connections. And by default, it's not that secure. It's open, it connects to everything.
Yes.
So there's a whole new, and then of course the model and the training of the model and making sure that that is still safe and secure. So it's another layer on security, and it's running on cloud, and it's running on information
I
security.
like
So
that.
it gets
Yeah.
more complex. So I think moving forward, security will get more focus and attention, and you need specialized roles because AI security is a whole other game than
Yeah.
regular cloud
I
security.
agree.
What are your
Yeah,
thoughts?
I really like that. That's interesting. I'm curious about that book, and I'm also fascinated about how you learn and then you kind of adopt the AI security. And I like that pyramid that you shared. AI security is one of the trends that is needed in the future. I mean, right now there's a lot of talk about Copilot, AI technologies, especially in Azure, but we need to step go one step back and think about how are we handling the security of the intelligent applications that we're building. So I think Azure and Microsoft has thought of security as well, and it's something that we need to spread out even to developers or architects as well. So I'm curious to learn more about the journey you have with AI security, and I myself will follow learning the AI basics first.
It is
Yeah.
really stretching my mind, to be honest. I mean, the SaaS, like Copilot, okay, it's a SaaS, so
Hmm.
there's not that much that you can tune or tweak. But one level below it is the
Hmm.
PaaS, so the Azure
Yes.
OpenAI, and then you got a lot of options
Yes.
and a lot of models and a lot of security
Yeah.
settings. So it's also new stretch for
Yes.
me to
I have a
understand.
question for you, because I know I have access to the Azure OpenAI, and I haven't built so much mini projects with it, but I know that you build your models and you talk to an endpoint, right? But I'm not sure if you've tried it, but in your perspective, it's the same common process, right? In terms of protecting the endpoint that you're talking to when you're building applications with it. What did you learn so far in that journey?
Yeah, so great question. So deploying the Azure OpenAI
Mm-hmm.
workload is just like deploying a
Yes.
VM. So it ends up in your resource group, but it needs
Mm-hmm.
connections. So that's kind of similar. But then the new stretch for me in security is that model, well, that algorithm needs to be trained. You're going to fine tune it for your business
Mm-hmm.
purpose. So you need data, training data. So you gotta attach the model to the training data and then let it train. So then comes the question: how do you secure the training
Yes,
data?
that's right.
Because if that gets corrupted,
Yeah.
your model is
Yeah.
corrupted. And what people also need to realize is, just like with a regular DevSecOps pipeline, there's going to be an AI ops
Mm-hmm.
pipeline, because your model will update as well every month, every 6 months, because the more data you have from your business, the better the model can
Mm-hmm.
predict things. So how do you keep that pipeline secure?
That's good. It's
Right?
like AI DevSecOps as well. Yes, I like that.
Yeah.
That's really interesting. Now I want to like Google and read read more about it. But last week, I think recently, when I read about more about AI security as well in terms of like cloud, Azure, I recently found out that Microsoft released, especially in Microsoft, we learned, there's a shared responsibility model. in terms of cloud computing, right? There's actually a shared responsibility AI model also now that they I found
Oh,
on
really?
Microsoft Learn. So if you haven't checked that out or audience haven't seen it,
No, no.
you can Google it or I can share it as well. I saw that there is a new
Cool.
AI model in terms of the different layers of it. So it was good. Uh,
Thanks for sharing. I
yeah,
didn't
I'll
know
share
about
it
that,
with
but
you or I'll link later. Yes.
yeah, really nice. Thanks for sharing that. So, last question, moving forward, the future. What's the future for Jonah looking like?
The future looking like, aside from my book, that's probably going to be translated in other languages, maybe second edition based on whatever updates. I'm in the process of building more cloud related courses with O'Reilly. No new book yet, except that I'm very inspired to write my non-technical book about my life. But the future is like more knowledge sharing on cloud, and me learning and increasing my competence in terms of AI and security with Azure, and hope to share it more alongside with building and sharing things about developer productivity as well, like Azure Developer CLI that I speak a lot lately these days.
That's wonderful to hear. You know, when I look at you and I see what you're doing, your strength is the way that you have a very disarming energy. Like you are authentic. You love to share. You're good at
Mm.
teaching. So actually, I was preparing for the podcast. I took some notes, and I'm gonna make a prediction, and I wrote
Mm-hmm.
it down. I think in the future of Jonah is a LinkedIn Learning or a Pluralsight
Yes,
course,
yeah,
something like
yes,
that.
yes. They did actually ask me, LinkedIn to make a course. It's just like I had to lay low last year because of the book project. But I'm interested to build more courses in those platforms as well.
See, I knew it. I knew it. That's great. I'm looking forward to
Yes,
that also for the O'Reilly
yes,
courses. So, Jonah, thank you very much for being here and sharing your thoughts. I really
yes.
enjoyed
Thank you
it.
so much for inviting me to be part of the Blue Dragon podcast. Great to be here.
It's the first episode, so it's going to be, I'm looking forward to the future. Thank you very much, Jonah, and see you next
Yes.
time. Thank you so much for tuning in to this episode of the Blue Dragon Podcast, a podcast dedicated to IT decision makers and helping them gain perspective of what's going on in cloud, AI, and security. If you enjoyed this episode, please give it a thumbs up, like, and subscribe to the channel so you'll be up to date all the time when new episodes come out. Your support really means a lot to me. Thank you very much. Have a great day and see you next time.